Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, I am from Amira Learning, and today our session is about the difference between structured literacy and balanced literacy. I know that you are walking into this space after caring for and teaching children all day long, and so I really appreciate that you have taken the time to do what you need to do to make sure that you are well and you are ready to be an adult learner for the next little bit of time. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jerusha Lopez. I was a teacher for 11 years, elementary school, third and fifth grade were where I spent most of my time in the classroom, but I also did some reading intervention work as well as being the director of PE for a little while. I was also a public speaker. I presented at the CCSA conference for many years in both Long Beach and in Sacramento, presenting on the importance of integrating the arts across all curricular areas, as well as providing grant opportunities and teaching teachers how to look up, fill out, and submit grants for money that could help with any of your whole school or classroom initiatives, whether that be field trips, supplies you might need, but we can't always rely on government funding, and so it's really important that we find the resources to support our students. And that was a really fun way for me to give back as I was learning about grants, sharing them with my fellow educators. After 11 years of teaching in the classroom, public speaking throughout that time, I became an elementary school principal of a charter school in Los Angeles. And I led that school through the pandemic, so it was some pretty wild times, as many of you also experienced that life, but really rewarding as well to see kids come through that and thrive, and my staff really rally together and support kids through a really difficult, trying time. I am also a mom of two. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, as we get into learning about literacy today, it's kind of all encompassing in my world right now. Not only the work I do, but my kids, language, sounds, making up words. It's really fun and adventurous time with language in our household right now. So, it's really been fun. Our objectives for today: identify key differences between structured and balanced literacy, understand instructional implications, and recognize connections to the science of reading. And we're going to get started by reflecting on our experience as emerging readers. So you yourself, how did you learn to read? When you think back to that time when you learned to read, what strategies do you remember? Were you an avid Reading Rainbow fan? Was LeVar Burton your secret weapon? Or perhaps you had Hooked on Phonics audio cassette tapes on repeat in your Walkman. I want you to also discuss what you notice about how reading is taught today. How is it different from the way that you learned? How is it the same, right? I'm going to give you a few minutes to turn and talk with your table mates and walk down memory lane. Think about what are those earliest strategies you remember about becoming a reader yourself, and how might it look different or the same as the way we teach kids today? Go ahead, talk with your table mates. Okay, after a few minutes of talking with table mates, I noticed some very engaged partnerships detailing specific reading strategies and approaches. I also heard some folks struggling to pinpoint exactly, what the approach was for your educators or your families. I know it's tricky sometimes to think back on your childhood and really take a different focus, right? Reading. How often do you sit back and think, how did I become a reader myself? But I would love to have some folks share out. Anybody willing to share out what you and your table mates discussed? Thank you. We'll go ahead and add that to the chart here. Amazing. Okay, so thank you all so much for sharing and contributing. Look at all these amazing ways in which we have become readers ourselves. And notice some of these ways are strategies we still use to teach kids today. Many of these we have kind of pushed off and no longer employ in our classrooms. But let's actually sit down and talk about the difference between structured and balanced literacy and see how many of these things we can fit into these two categories. So structured literacy is more explicit and systematic. It's based on systemic, and it is based on the science of reading. working in intentional sequential stages that build upon each other, ensuring a higher rate of mastery before layering on the next component. So take a look at the image here, right? We have this family taking these bricks and building them. There's a system in place, there's a structure, and it's creating this really strong foundation. Balanced literacy is a more flexible and implicit approach using leveled readers and involving a decent amount of cueing and guessing for students. And this approach often leads to gaps in children's understanding of decoding, reading, and comprehension. The instruction doesn't always meet the child's needs. So here we have this other image where, sure, there is a foundation. There are explicit things being taught, right? But the structure might not be the same, and there are some gaps. So we may be moving on or adding in more content before those skills have been mastered. And so notice this is not as structured of a system, of a foundation that we're building here. Let's talk a little bit about the science of reading. So I want you to think of reading development as a house built from the ground up. Think about the foundation, right? We have phonemic awareness, that's hearing sounds in spoken language. We have a framework next, right? We're taking all those 2x4s and building the framework of our house. This is phonics. We're connecting these sounds to letters. All right, we've got our framework. We are now putting up our walls. So this fluency, reading smoothly and accurately. We've got our walls built. We have our floor walls. We have everything. We have our roof. We're good to go. Now let's start adding in our furniture. This is vocabulary, knowing the meaning of words inside the house. And lastly, our roof, right? We're going to close this thing in. The final bit of this house build, right? We're making sense. This is comprehension. We're making sense of the entire structure. This is all the text. So the house shows each component, how it supports the one above it, and they're all essential to making reading strong, stable, and complete. The same way as, you would not want to live in a house that was missing one of these components. Hollis Scarborough's reading rope illustrates how skilled reading relies on the intertwining of language comprehension and word recognition. And each strand or pillar, the 5 pillars, they work together gradually, strengthening to create fluent, meaningful reading. So imagine one way that you can imagine this in your head is like using pipe cleaners, right? If you were to intertwine these things and different components of language comprehension and word recognition, all of these things have to be weaved together to make this really strong, sturdy rope that is then leading itself as it progresses, leading itself to becoming a strong, fluent reader. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these shifts that can be made in your classroom or your instructional space, moving from balanced literacy to structured literacy. I know change can be overwhelming, right? I'm looking around this room right now, and you're thinking shifts. Wait, I have to shift things in my classroom? Like, what time do I have to do that? What resources do I have to do that? And I know that change can be overwhelming, but especially when it's paired with your daily responsibility to meet the differing needs of dozens of students in multiple subject areas, also while caring for their social, emotional well-being and physical safety. Not to mention those neuro differences that each child has in your classroom, right? But the truth is, you're actually making small shifts and adjustments every day to meet your students' needs and enable them to grasp new concepts. So with the support we're going to provide throughout these multiple trainings this year, you're actually going to notice that this structured literacy instruction will improve your quality and effectiveness of your teaching over time and reduce the amount of time that you have to spend reteaching and pulling small literacy groups aside. We don't all have time to do tier 2 and tier 3 literacy instruction all day long, when if we are being really intentional about the building blocks and the sequence that we're teaching reading skills, then we're actually going to have less need for this tier 2 and tier 3 instruction, because your kids will be mastering each skill as you intentionally teach them and kind of weave this rope together for their reading skills. So I want to come back here for a moment and talk about some of these shifts that can be made, right? They don't all need to be big, overwhelming. I'm throwing everything that I have about literacy out the window and I'm bringing all new in, and I'm going to need to spend an entire evening here rearranging my classroom to meet these needs. It can be as simple as, adding structured phonics routines into your day. Maybe this is a few minutes in the morning to start, right? So instead of a drawing warm up, maybe they're coming in and you're going to have a 10-minute phonics lesson that's very structured. It could be getting rid of your word wall and implementing a sound wall. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I know that we got into a lot of things, and this is just a really quick snippet of what our entire presentation was about. But I want to challenge you before you walk away from this space today. What is one small instructional shift or physical adjustment in your learning space that can be made this week to impact students' reading success? So I want to challenge you here. One thing this week, okay? You don't need to commit to a whole new curriculum or anything else right now. What I really want you to think is, in my space, take a moment right now, in my space, what is it that I can physically change? What's an approach to my teaching? What's a shift in my schedule that I can make tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, this week, that I can walk away knowing I am taking a step towards helping improve my students' reading by changing the way that I'm approaching teaching them with structured literacy. I'm going to go ahead in the chat right now and I'm going to send a link to each of you. If you could click on that after you've thought of your one commitment for this week, go ahead and click on that Jamboard and add it there. And this is going to be your exit ticket. Thank you so much for your time today and engagement, and especially for all you do for kids every day.